Okay, I'm recording, I think. So, okay. So you are recording this meeting. Yeah. So yeah, that's all. So every one of you. So will there a consent dialogue that will come to you guys?
Oh yes, sir. It just tells us that the recording has started on the top.
Okay.
And
Okay. Nice. Nice. Okay. Good. Fine. So yeah. So yeah, I need some time to get used to this. Okay. Okay. So. Yeah, as we said, we are talking yesterday. The course is about design and analysis of algorithms. So you guys have come across many algorithms, and what we will sort of concentrate in this course is the design aspects of it. What are the sort of uh, things when you sort of suppose someone gives you a problem, right, and you want to find come up with an algorithm for it, right? What are the sort of ways you can try to attack the problem, right? We will try to sort of see some generic techniques which could be used to sort of come up with a solution, right? So and then you sort of try to, then the later part is after you do that, now how do you check it, right? So coming up with it is very similar to what you do with uh, the any mathematical statement, right? So how do you sort of try to prove that your algorithm is correct, right? So suppose your algorithm is not correct, then you again go back and sort of tweak it so that it works, right? This is all this comprises of the design aspects of yeah, the anything, any designing anything we need, right? So and also, yeah, probably I might have said before, with the risk of reiterating too much, but I still want you to reinforce it that any theoretical computer science subject, right? Now you guys might be much more familiar with the term than what you were in the first year, right? Any theoretical science, computer science subject is very similar to mathematics. Okay, so algorithms was you don't say that algorithms is computer science for that matter, right? Algorithms yeah, is sort of started as a mathematical thing, and in the last semester I think you guys saw a philosophical view of what we call as algorithms by sort of equating it to the Turing machine, right? So that is what was the sort of goal of theory of computation, right? um, where people knew, see for example, algorithm for GCD, Euclid's algorithm is thousands of years old, right? So Euclid had many algorithms. There were many people who had lot of algorithms. The algorithms is just a step by step procedure of doing things, right? I mean, if you think about it, probably recipes are the first algorithms, right? Cooking recipes, right? So you by step and step you say what to do and what to do until you obtain a final product, whether it is good or bad. Yeah, that is up to the thing, right? So some things work out, some things don't, right? So just like algorithms, some algorithms work out, some don't, right? Then you go back to the sort of yeah, kitchen table or the drawing table, and again you start redesigning again. Right. So this is what was the case with algorithms also. People had come up with a lot of algorithms, and there were many algorithms for different things, mostly related to number theory and things like that. But people never knew uh, sort of a mathematical definition for algorithms. What do you call an algorithm? The problem was this, right? The problem started with, say, I think, yeah, Hilbert, I think, in 1900, right? Um, in the International Congress of Mathematicians, probably in Paris or something, he came up with 23 problems which you would like to sort of to see it solved in the next century, he said something like 23 problems for the next century or for this century, something like that. Hilbert was one of the most famous mathematicians at the time, and everyone was very much everyone listened to him, and whatever he said was also extremely sort of important, right? So in that sense, in that meeting, he also came up with one problem called as the uh, one of these 23 problems was the problem about algorithms. I mean, what we call as algorithms now, right? What he asked was, does there exist a step-by-step procedure, right? So such that you given any polynomial, right? So given any polynomial, can you find whether the polynomial has integral roots or not? Okay. So this was the question he asked, and people tried. I mean, Hilbert was very famous, and he was speaking sense, right? And people anyway jumped on it. This is one of the things. They looked at many different problems. This is was one problem. People, mathematicians all over the world, sort of started thinking about it, and then they sort of they tried to come up with an algorithm to see, given any polynomial, can we sort of find an integral, find if the polynomial has an integral root or not, right? So this was, they were trying to do this, but it was, they were unable to do anything actually. They tried something, but they were trying to get a counter example and things like that, right? Many people, they came up with some algorithm, some sort of a procedure or an algorithm, but yeah, soon they could see that they couldn't prove it, right? Or they couldn't prove that it works for all cases and things like that, right? So here came the problem that they sort of uh, couldn't answer the question, right, in one direction, and they don't know how to sort of go about in the other direction at all, right? So Hilbert asked, does there exist a procedure? So suppose they found a procedure, they knew how to say yes, they knew how to design an algorithm, sort of. If there was an algorithm, they could come up with an algorithm. But the other direction, to say that there is no algorithm, right? So this is very significant. You need to understand this. How do you say? So you guys have sort of written a lot of code, right? And you have seen a lot of algorithms, right? Every program you wrote, it's an algorithm, right? Starting from finding whether a number is prime or not, right? Whether it was a very simple algorithm, very obvious one, and not the most efficient one, and things like that. But you have written a lot of algorithms. All of you are sort of familiar with it, right? But what the question is much more philosophical, right? So or much more, yeah, it is very sort of difficult in a sense. You suppose you are given a problem, there exists an you come up with an algorithm, then it is easy to say that sort of relatively easy to say that this algorithm works. You use some mathematical formulation and you prove that it works, right? For example, when you sort of do this primality test, right? So given whether a given number is prime, right? Then you use sort of very simple mathematical sort of constructs which we did in even discrete mathematical structures, to sort of say that it's enough to take numbers from 2 to say n by 2 or 2 to root n and divide by each of them, right? If the number n is not a prime, it will always have a factor between 1 to root n, right? Something like that, right? So then you could, since you are checking all of them, so that sort of shows the correctness of the algorithm, right? So this is how we sort of come up with an algorithm and prove that it is correct. But how do you say that there is no algorithm at all, right? So this is sort of a lower bounding, right? This is extremely difficult. What you need to say is that you come up with something and you don't get it. When you say that there cannot be any algorithm, it is not as if that you can't get it. What you are saying is no one can get it, right? That is no one, however smart. There can be a lot of people who are much smarter than you. There are you can bring in Hilbert, you can bring in Russell, you can bring anyone, the most famous mathematician. You can bring back Euclid and Gauss and everyone, right? Terence Tao or anyone. But what you are saying is, no matter who tries, right? There does not exist an algorithm, right? For this, no one will be able to come up with an algorithm for this, right? So that is much more difficult to say, right? People didn't even know how to sort of say this, because till that time they never had a formal definition of what an algorithm is, right? People kept on trying this, and the big breakthrough came in form of what you already have studied, Alan Turing, right? Turing and Church, right? It came with respect to Church Turing thesis, right? For the first time, Turing defined, I mean, Turing machine became much more sort of famous than the lambda calculus or predicate calculus of Alonzo Church, because it was much more intuitive and much more easy to understand. Okay, we will sort of, it's enough to sort of, they are equivalent. It's enough to talk about one thing, right? So Turing came up with Turing machine, and he said that anything that can be solved on Turing machine is basically an algorithm exists for it. Okay, so an algorithm is equivalent to a Turing machine, right? Every Turing machine you constructed in the last class is basically an algorithm, right? You might have constructed a Turing machine to sort of check a palindrome, right? That is an algorithm, right? So and this is something he sort of gave the equivalence. So algorithms is equal to Turing machines. Okay, for the first time, mathematicians or researchers had a way of saying mathematically precisely what an algorithm is, right? So now you have to just prove that there does not exist a Turing machine for this problem, right? The problem about given a polynomial, can you check whether the polynomial has integral roots or not? Okay, so yeah, I am assuming that all of you are comfortable with the terminology I am using. If you are not, if you feel somewhat, I am using something which you have not heard or something, please stop me. Okay, so as I have said before, it is not a monologue, right? It is still a class, it's a discussion, right? You guys need to sort of, try to be interactive. Okay, so yeah, so this is what people sort of they add a tool now to see if algorithms are sort of does there exist an algorithm or not, right? So using this, many sort of things were solved, and this was a monumental result, right? In 19 sort of 32, I think, right? Around that time, 1932 or 1936, probably 1936. Notice that this was uh, Alan Turing's PhD thesis, right? And he came up with this when he was just 24 years old. Okay, he was just 24 years old, and he came up with this, and that guy did everything very fast, and he also died, right? So pretty fast, right? So he died in what, 1950s, 51 or 52, right? Due to sort of unfortunate circumstances with respect to the societal norms, right? So yeah, he was asked to take some hormonal things, which he rather thought that he would die rather than do that. But things were not, at least people were much more conservative than what the word is, rather than what it is now, right? So he was thinking that he himself was a hero, and notice that he also helped the British very much in the World War II, right? Decoding the ciphers of German submarines and things like that, right? That was the societal part of it. So coming back to the mathematical contributions of him, this was a monumental contribution by Turing when he was just 24 years, right? So that is that was one of the most important tools. I mean, that 30s decade is very significant. I mean, Turing came up with this, Gödel came up with this incompleteness theorem and things like that. So these are extremely monumental results, right? So after this, mathematicians knew how to talk about algorithms and how to sort of say whether something exists or not. This was in 1936, I think. But even when it was this, it took a lot of effort, and I think in 1970 or 71, something around this time, right, in the 70s, three mathematicians sort of proved that there does not exist an algorithm to check whether the given polynomial has integral roots or not. Okay, there is no algorithm at all to check this, right? Given a polynomial, whether it has integral roots. Okay, this was something that was really extremely and very important result, right? But what made it possible was the sort of definition of Turing about algorithms. Okay, this is some sort of an history about algorithms. Yeah, when you talk of Turing, you don't talk of him as a computer scientist, right? So though he tried to sort of define what computing is, and it is mathematics. What you studied in the theory of computation is also completely mathematics, right? So because we implement it using computers, right? We come back, it is associated with computer science and things like that, right? So in that sense, when you are doing these things, you should start thinking like a mathematician and try to see whether you can prove any statement you say, right? So in that sense, the treatment will be, as I have said before, the treatment will be very similar to what we did in discrete mathematical structures. Okay. Okay. So good. So that's about a little bit about algorithms. So notice that in your last class, I think you have sort of seen different Turing machines and things like that. And you might have seen other machines, finite state automaton and push down automaton, which are a bit less power than the Turing machines. And you also saw using either pumping lemma or sort of other tools that there are sort of problems which cannot be solved using say finite state automata, using push down automata, and also using Turing machines, right? There are many problems which cannot be. Halting problem is one thing, right? What we call as halting problem, right, is one thing, or recognition problem is one thing which cannot be solved using a Turing machine. So, so that is in that course, the goal was to sort of see that there exists problems which are not computable, right? So there exist problems which do not have any Turing machine or algorithms. So in this course, the thing is we will only concentrate on problems which can be computed, right? So while last course was about computability, this course is more about complexity, right? Once the problem is say computable or even decidable, once it is Turing decidable, given an algorithm, you can say yes or no always, right? So it doesn't, it is not just recognizable, it is also decidable, right? So once it is decidable, now how fast, how efficient can you do this? Okay. So that is the sort of goal of this course, right? So all the problems we see are Turing machine decidable, right? So they always have a Turing machine, right, which will either accept it or reject it, right? Upon that, once it does it, we sort of want to sort of see how efficiently we can do it. How efficiently we can do it, not only on any Turing machine, but mainly deterministic Turing machine, right? We will also come to non-determinism when we that is the goal of sort of complexity theory. We will sort of try to differentiate problems which can be solved on a deterministic Turing machine and which can be solved on a non-deterministic Turing machine. Okay, we will try to see, and we will try to sort of see with respect to computability. You might have seen that deterministic and non-deterministic are equivalent. When it is a finite state automaton, they are equivalent. In push down automaton, they are not equivalent. But when you come to Turing machine, they are again equivalent. Whether you take deterministic Turing machine or a non-deterministic Turing machine, they are equal in power, right? The computability aspect doesn't change it. If you can do something on a non-deterministic Turing machine, you can also do it on a deterministic Turing machine, taking a bit more time, right? More time is needed, but not you can still solve it. But here that is not the goal. So you want to solve it faster, right? So once you want to solve it faster, then can you do it, right? Then deterministic and non-deterministic Turing machines make a lot of difference actually. So you might have sort of, when you're sort of converted a deterministic finite state automaton to non-deterministic finite state automaton to deterministic one, basically the subset construction, you might have seen that the number of states sort of explodes, right? If n is the number of states in a non-deterministic one, it can become something like 2 to the power n when you want to go to a deterministic one, right? This might become the problem even with the computation, right? It can go up to exponential as well as the factorial times, right? So depending on the kind of problem that are there, right? So, but we want to differentiate them. That will be the part of the later part of the course where we sort of do complexity theory, right? Before that, what we'll try to sort of see is basically the designing simple algorithms and try to sort of get familiarized or comfortable with all these things. Okay. Okay. So before, yeah, that is one thing which we will be seeing in this course. Yeah. So even again today, this course I want to just use to sort of yeah, get all the information and be on the same page so that we will start from tomorrow or even today, right? Let us, yeah, at least my strategy is to sort of start with something you already know and sort of continue with it, right? I will start with some algorithm which all of you will know, right? And then we will sort of try to see how to do it and how to use those things to sort of solve very nice, not so easy looking sort of problems, and then sort of continue it and try to put it into a design strategy and try to see whether we can do something using these strategies and things like that. Okay. So in that sense, we will be sort of seeing maybe 2, 3 or a bit more, right? Design techniques, something like divide and conquer, greedy, and sort of sledgehammer tools like dynamic programming, which you can use sort of everywhere, right? The earlier two things are very specific to the problem, but dynamic programming is something which you can use almost on any problem, right? We'll come to that. We will come to all that, and we will sort of try to sort of see whether we can, yeah. The idea will be to sort of understand these things using concrete examples, right? And trying to sort of see what we can do. And also one advice is that don't stick on to some particular technique or something when you're trying to solve a problem, right? So it is just like solving puzzles, right? So always now, since you have seen this term anyway, I can use it. It's better to go breadth first than depth first, right? So it is always much more useful so that you try many different things. And I think this is also the way of sort of converting a non-deterministic Turing machine to a deterministic one. You can't go depth first, right? You can't go in one of the branch because that branch might not even end, right? So you need to always go breadth first, right? After one step, it doesn't end, right? It will at least some branch, it will end in some kth step, right? If you go in to that much sort of level in the breadth first manner, you will always find an accepting state, right? That is about non-determinism, right? So here also, I mean, when you are solving also, it is yeah, a generic rule, sort of a suggestion. I wouldn't even say a rule. It's a suggestion that many a times it's you can sort of see what are all the different ways I can solve it and see if there is an easy solution. And with respect to algorithms, what I would like to say is that so when you are given a problem, try to come up with some algorithm. Don't worry about its efficiency. Okay, come up with some stupid looking algorithm. Okay, so it might not, I mean, the word stupid or trivial or non-trivial are relative, right? So that's why whatever you might not even feel, sort of think that that is a good algorithm, right? Don't worry about it. First come up with it. That tells you that there exists some algorithm, right? Then you sort of and hopefully try to see if you can make it polynomial later, right? So we will come to this. You can make it somewhat efficient. Then you try it for the best sort of efficiency you can hope for, which you can intuitively think about. Okay, so that's always the thing, because once you sort of see a positive answer, so your brain also sort of tries to sort of get adjusted to the problem. You might sort of yeah, observe something, some observations you might get, and that will make it easier for you guys to solve the problem. Okay, okay, so yeah, so I would so are you guys aware of polynomial and exponential time complexity?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, we are.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what do you mean by polynomial?
The complexity is some power of n, or it is not.
Some
like
power
it-
of n. So something
Yes.
like n to the power c, right? Where c is a constant.
Yes, sir.
What is this n?
It depends on the input size. It could.
It could be input size, is it? Or can it be anything else?
The number of operations.
So is
Number
it?
of operations, sir.
No, I am talking about n, not n to the
Yes,
power
sir.
c. N to the power c is number of operations, right? Generally. I mean, that is what you call as running time, right? So
Yes,
what
sir.
you call as running time is basically almost the number of operations that you sort of express with respect to something called as this n or something, where n is the input size. N we say as input size, right? Good. Now let us try to understand this. I mean, what this is. Um, So this is something what you call as polynomial time, right? Something like big O notation. Are you comfortable?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I will go through it later. See, I don't want to go through yeah, definitions, and it's a pain. I mean, it's boring also, right? So we will sort of learn this with the algorithms itself, right? Once you sort of get used to this, then you yourself can come up with the definition, right? Big O is just like an upper bound. In terms of discrete mathematics, what we can say is when we say big O of some thing n of c, this sort of is an upper bound for the algorithm. When you say what is it, sigma, right, of some n of c, it is the lower bound. You can't do below this, right? You can't do better than this, or you can, for with respect to the algorithm you have given, and you can't it is you can always do better. This is the worst case time, and this is sort of the best you could hope for, in the sense that there are instances where you will definitely need this many this much time, right? It is what you can think of this is sort of an upper bound and this is lower bound, right? For an algorithm, right? So we have seen many upper bounds and lower bounds, right? So in that sense, it will be much more easy for you to understand this, right? So when it is required, we'll come back to it for the formal definition and things like that. Before even going to that, I would like to sort of, yeah, just discuss about what we call as input size and whether some algorithms are polynomial or some are something of an exponential algorithm is something like order of 2 to the n, right? Or it requires 2 to the n time, or something like order of c to the n, right? C to the n or something like n factorial, right? All these are not so efficient algorithms. Okay. Now let us try to see if we sort of can differentiate the sort of algorithms we have seen till now with respect to these terms. So all of you guys might have sort of did uh, wrote a problem, given a list of n numbers, you sort of wrote a program to search a particular number, right? So how many different searching algorithms did you study? Suppose you are given a list of n numbers, you want to search for a number. How do you do it?
Linear search.
Linear search. Yeah.
And
What do you do
binary.
in what? Yeah, binary search, linear search, right? So you guys said linear search, binary search. Yeah, what do you do in linear search?
Oh, we just check the
Reverse
elements
array
one by
from
one.
left to right.
You sort of order the elements in some manner, right? So here in your algo, in your program might be, you might have maintained an array, right? That is the ordering, right? You sort of, there is an order of elements, you sort of check in that order, right? You check the first element, the second element, so on and so forth. And at the worst, you might need to check n elements, right? Once there are n elements, you will be checking n elements, right? Is that fine?
Yes.
Okay, good. So you will search, you will check only n elements, and that will anyway sort of give you, always give you an algorithm. You can sort of do it in n time or order of, let us say order of n time, right? So that the constants are somewhat, we don't care about the constant so much as of now. Okay. So what about binary search? How much time can you do it in?
We divide the array into two halves and we search by comparison.
Come again?
So we divide the array into two parts. We compare and we search.
Yeah.
We compare elements, and in binary search, all the elements are arranged in ascending or descending order.
Yeah. So the prerequisite is you want the sort of numbers to be sorted, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Once something is given to you in a sorted manner, right? Then you can. Yeah. Someone had something else. Right. So suppose something is given to you in a sorted manner, then you can sort of do this binary search, right? So you divide the array and you sort of see whether it is in the first half or the second half, and you keep on doing this recursively, right? So what is the time complexity of this?
Log n.
Log n.
Log n. Good. Okay. Nice. So right. This is yeah. So this sort of yeah. We are trying to sort of fit in these terms with respect to things we have seen. Yeah. Nothing very. Yeah. So sort of easier algorithms, right? But still good. So now let us move to this is nice, right? So let us go to this problem, basically primality testing, right? So basically what you are given is a number, right? And you want to check whether it is prime or not, right? So now, so what is the algorithm for this?
Check all numbers to the root n, whether they divide the number. Actually, from 2 to root n.
Okay, so you are given a number n, right? So you are given number p, right? Let me just, you are given p, so you check from 2 to say p by 2, right? Something like this. Sorry, p by 2, or you don't even require p by 2, so you require only root p, right? Till root p.
Yes.
Okay, so you go from 2 to root p, right? So is that fine?
Yes,
So,
sir. Real class, sir. Nanigan.
so please guys mute when you are not answering, right? Yeah, so 2 to root p, right? Once you are doing from 2 to root p, you can always do this, right? Good. So is everyone fine with this algorithm? You check from 2 to root p. If the number p is not a prime, you will get a factor within 2 and root p. Is that fine?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, if you are not too much fine with it, you can even go till p by 2, right? That's fine, right? Okay. So, but that is a simple one. This is anyway a bit better than this. Now, what is the time complexity of this algorithm?
Root p.
N power 1 by 2.
Yeah, something like that. Root p, order of root p, right? So okay, now let me take linear search, this one. Let me take one more thing. So did you guys also found the Fibonacci number, nth Fibonacci number? So you had an algorithm for this, right? Finding the nth Fibonacci number.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, what was the algorithm?
We have say p1 and p2, and we calculate the next number, and then we update the previous values.
Yeah, you sort of update it and you can do it recursively as well as, which will take a lot of time, but you can do it even iteratively, right? So you sort of start from, say, the first Fibonacci f of 1 is 0, maybe f of 2 is 1, right? So on and so forth. F of 3 will be equal to 1, f of 4 is 2, then 3, then 5, 8, 13, so on and so forth, right? You can keep doing this. Once you know the previous two things, you can use the formula. F of n is f of n minus 1 plus n minus 2, f of n minus 2, right? So, and you can use that formula to get the Fibonacci number, right? Now, what will be the time complexity of this algorithm?
O of n.
O of n, right? So we are writing the constants. So this big O notation is good for that, right? So you can hide all the constants, right? So there can be something like the real time would be something like some k into n, where k is a constant plus some c, right? Now we are writing all this uh, k and c, right? In this big O notation, right? Good. Nice, right? So it's basically about limits, right? As n tends to infinity, all this k and c become negligible, right? Okay. So this is sort of almost the formal definition of big O, right? So this is order of n, this is order of root p, this is order of n log n, right? Nice. So now let us look at these things and let us try to see, right? So So with respect to say searching, so we add linear search, right? Is this a polynomial time algorithm?
Yes, sir.
Yes, right? So there are n numbers and you get you can do it in order of n time, right? So it is a sort of linear time algorithm or a polynomial, definitely a polynomial time algorithm, right? So what about primality testing? Testing whether the number is prime.
Yes, sir.
Polynomial, sir.
So this is polynomial. This is both are polynomial. Log n anyway is also again polynomial. This is polynomial. This is This is also polynomial. Is it? Right?
Uh, uh, but input size is, I think, number of bits. No, so last year you told.
Okay. I told you last year, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
So at least someone remembers what I told last year. Good. Okay. Yeah. So here again, when we come here, we need to talk about input size. Right? So what is the input size?
Number of bits. So log.
Yeah. Here
if
what?
it's
See, suppose think about now you have your Turing machine, right? How much space does it take in a Turing machine to express this? Okay. Generally, you can assume that your Turing machine is unary or binary. That makes a lot of difference, right? But since our computers are in binary, we always assume that the input is binary. Okay, you can represent it in binary, right? Suppose you are given this number p. How many cells in the Turing machine are required to sort of store it?
P.
P in binary.
Log P, sir.
Log base
Log,
2.
sorry, correct. Log 2 base 2 p, right? You need only log p sort of cells in your Turing machine to sort of store this. Or in other words, you need only log p bits in your computer to store this. So here the input size that is n, which this is equal to log p. Okay. The input size is log p. Okay. Now your running time, what you have given is order of root p, right? Now what does this become? So in terms, how can you write it in terms of n? This one?
2 power n.
2 power n, right? So once you take root, n by 2, right? Order of n to the power sorry, 2 to the power n by 2, right? Something like that. See here the input size is the number of bits, that is log p, right? And your running time is root p. Root p is basically 2 to the power n by 2, right? So here this will give that p is something like 2 to the power n, right? Root p is 2 to the power n by 2, right? So your running time is 2 to the power n by 2, right? This is exponential. Okay. The algorithm what you have sort of written in your first year is an exponential algorithm. Okay. So here the input size is log p rather than p. Okay. So that is
So,
one
but
reason.
in the
Yeah.
previous case also, why are we not storing in binary then all numbers?
Exactly. That's a good question, and that's a very nice question, right? So in the previous case also, we are exactly doing the same thing. We are still storing the numbers in binary only. Okay, but how many numbers are there?
And
Yeah, there are n numbers. You need to store n numbers, right? So whatever number you take here, right, it will become something like n into log whatever p, right, where p is the maximum number or the average number, whatever it is, right? Still the input size is something like this. Okay, it is still at least n. Okay, so since there are n numbers here, notice that there is only one number. Okay, yeah, but here there are n numbers. Okay, That's why the input size here is still n. Okay, you can say n or n log p, right? So the something like that. Is that fine? The difference
sir.
between these two. Here there is only one number. Here there are n numbers. Okay. So that is why the input size here we can think of it as almost n, right? So we can sort of be very pedantic and sort of say that it should be the number of bits will be something like there will be a log p and things like that. But anyway, we are sort of forgetting that, right? So it is around n, right? Almost n, at least n, right? Here, but there is only one number, and to store that one number, you need only log p bits. Okay. So since you need only log p bits, that is the input size. And that will sort of yeah, but you take root p time, which is basically order of 2 to the power n by 2 time, which is exponential with respect to the input size. Is that fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So any questions till now?
No, sir.
So the linear yeah, the linear search basically what you did is a polynomial time algorithm, right? Though it looked like order of n, the primality test, though it looked like root p, it is an exponential algorithm, right? What we have is an exponential algorithm. Since you have now learned Turing machine, it is extremely useful actually. You can sort of try to see how you sort of, I mean, both of these can be sort of encoded as decision problems, right? So your searching can be easily done using these things, right? And your primality testing, right? Check whether a number is prime can be, you can build a Turing machine for this. Did you guys build a Turing machine for this? To check whether a number is prime or not?
No, sir.
No. So if you have not done it, I would strongly suggest you to do it. Okay. Then you will sort of believe that anything that can be done on a normal computer can be done on a Turing machine. Okay. It is not too difficult. If you sort of want to do it, probably we can do it in some tutorial, right? I don't want to take the normal classes to do it, right? They are extremely nice, wonderful Turing machines. I mean, you would love designing such Turing machines, right? It will tell you how to sort of start from basics and do it. So this is, and also not too difficult, I would say, right? Check a primality testing in Turing machines. Yes, at least this algorithm is pretty easy. Okay. Okay, and it's also involved. I mean, you will understand Turing machines better, right? So you will sort of see those many cells, right? So you need only this cells, and it's a decision problem, and you need to just say yes or no at the end. Okay, good. That's nice. So this is a polynomial algorithm, while this algorithm, what we said, this is not polynomial, it is exponential. Right? Here the input size is log p. Okay, good. So this is very important, right? You guys need to sort of concentrate on this. This is very important for you guys. I will assume these things when I move further, right? I will not every time say that look at the input size and things like that. I will assume that you will sort of see it, right? You should get used to it. Okay. So initially we will sort of slowly go about it. After that, I think you will be accustomed to it. I am sure. I have seen you guys. So you will be easily accustomed to these things. Okay. So now let us come to Fibonacci numbers. Now what is the, is this algorithm polynomial or exponential?
It depends on the implementation. If you use recursive, then it becomes exponential. But if you do it iteratively like this, then it will be linear.
So, assume that we are using iterative.
Then it's linear.
Then it's linear, is it? Why? Why is it linear?
Because we can use the there are totally n different say states that we need to calculate, and for every state
no, that is your thing, right? What is the input size here?
Input size
2, right?
Input size is just a number.
2, right? Two numbers, 0 and 1.
No, this is
input
not the
size
input.
is the
I
Till
want
when
you
we
guys,
have to
I
find.
want you guys to find the
Fibonacci.
nth Fibonacci number, right?
Yes, and n is the input.
Yeah,
Means one number
n
is
is the
given,
input.
sir. Basically.
Yeah, one
So
number. I am
number
still giving you
stored
one
as,
number.
so it is
Input
stored as
size will
log n
be
and we
log
have
p.
Yeah,
Log n.
you, whatever length, I don't mind it, right? So I give you one number, right? How many bits does it take to represent? Say, let me say p, right? Again, it takes only log p bits to represent, right? That number. Now what do you say about the algorithm you have implemented? Is it polynomial or exponential?
exponential, sir.
Exponential.
Yes, sir.
Why?
So basically we are doing O of n. So if we write like basically O of p we are doing. So if input size n is equal to log p, then
Hmm.
p is equal to 2 power n. So O of 2 power n.
Okay, good. Is that fine?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you guys said that linear search is polynomial, right? Prime is exponential, and this finding this Fibonacci number is again exponential. Fine?
So here, are we only looking at the space complexity or the time complexity?
Time complexity, right? Time complexity with respect to the space it requires for the input size. I mean, we need to compare the time complexity with respect to something, right? That something is input size, n, right? Whatever is the input size, right? Is that fine? Does that answer your question, Alan?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay, good. Okay, okay. So when I said you to, I mean, there is a reason why I sort of started talking about Turing and Turing machine and before going to algorithms. When you are thinking about time complexity, try to take this problem and try to sort of put it in the Turing machine language and try to see how do you sort of, how does it look? Okay, how do you pose this problem, linear search, in a Turing machine problem? How will you input into a Turing machine?
Sir, n numbers written in a linear order with a special character in between. Like each
Okay.
number is written in the form of bits with a special character.
Okay, great. So you use a delimiter, you have a special character for a delimiter. There will be n numbers, and then you will also give one more number which you want to search, right? That is the thing, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, you will look at that number and you will search in all these things. So have you guys done this program in Turing machine?
No, sir.
Yeah, this is easy. This you should, if you are not done, you should go back and definitely do this linear search. Okay, this is pretty easy. Okay, good. So that is how you sort of represent it in a Turing machine. So how do you do for, what do you do for primality testing? You are given a number, right? You take that and you use more space or whatever thing, but as little time as possible to test it. Now, how do you sort of give this problem on a Turing machine? Is it a decision problem? Is this problem, the Fibonacci number, finding the nth Fibonacci number, is it a decision problem?
No, sir.
No, right? So, but Turing machines can also be used to sort of give an output, right? So now, so when you sort of input this into a Turing machine, right? It will take only log p bits, but where will the output be? We need the nth Fibonacci number, right? We need Fn. Where do you store this Fn? Again on the tape, right? So this is not a decision problem. You need to output something. You should again store the output on the tape, right? So how much space does this take to be stored on the tape?
N, O of P.
F of n takes order of
F of
p.
n takes n because f of n grows
Number will be stored in
exponentially.
memory, right, sir?
Yeah, f of n grows exponentially. It is something like 1.6 something to the power n, right?
Yes, sir.
Almost the golden ratio, right? So yeah, all the Fibonacci numbers grow in this manner. It grows exponentially, right? If p is the number which we have given, right? So then the f of n will be something like order of 1.61 to the power n, right? So it's an exponential thing. So which means that you need these many bits to store it, right? I don't want to write all this. You need around 2 to the power n bits to store the answer, right? So you require in your Turing
Just
machine.
n bits, no, sir.
Oh, sorry, it requires n bits. 2 to the power n.
2 power p, 2 power p.
Yeah, it requires around p bits, right? Almost around p bits, p or p minus 1 bits, right? It is not even p minus 1. It requires at least p bits. P minus 1 is n by yeah, 2 to the power n minus 1. We don't know how much 2 to the power n minus 1 is. Yeah, that is difficult to say, right? It requires around p bits to be stored, right? It is 1.61 to the power n, right? So the output requires p bits, okay? If p is your input, right? The p Fibonacci number, the output has to still be stored in the Turing machine, right? It requires p bits, right? So when we say input size, you need to sort of factor in this output also, right? When we say input size, this is not only just the size of the input, it is the size of the input as well as the output, okay? Or in other words, how do you ask this question as a decision problem in a Turing machine? So pth Fibonacci number, right? How do you convert it into a decision problem? Yes or no question, right? This was a yes or no question, right? How do you convert this into a yes or no question?
If the Fibonacci numbers are number is computed, then the Turing machine will stop. So it means the input has been accepted.
Yeah, Fibonacci number, how do you know that it has been computed? Whether it is computed correctly or not?
Here to check if the current number is the sum of the previous two numbers.
Yeah, right. No, but again, to check the correctness of the previous two, you are assuming that the previous two numbers are correct, right?
Yes, yes.
No, the thing is, how do we sort of give it to the Turing machine, right? I see. Finally, you guys have seen Turing machines. You guys have seen other things. So machines as sort of acceptors or rejectors, or machines as transducers, right? Most of the times they were either accepting or rejecting. Now, how do I convert this problem? Here in this problem, I am giving it a number. It will again outputting me a large number. But I don't want this. I want it to say either just yes or no. How do you convert this problem to a yes no problem?
Whether the given number is a Fibonacci number or not.
Exactly. Exactly. That's a nice thing, right? What you give is basically two numbers, right? You give a number, say q, and you give another number p. You say that the question is say q the pth Fibonacci number, right? What you ask is q the pth Fibonacci number, right? Here you just have to say yes or no, okay? So this is what you do in a Turing machine, right? If you want it to be a decision problem, then what you do is you give two numbers, q and p, right? Then you ask the question whether q is the pth Fibonacci number, okay? Now notice that now the input size is dependent on both P and Q, right? And we know that Q is of the order 1.61 to the power P, right? Which would require around P bits. So here the input requires P bits, and hence this algorithm, what you said, what you sort of implemented in your first year, here the input size is around P rather than, but it is not log P. The input is not log P, but it is P. Okay. And the algorithm, what you designed here is a polynomial time algorithm. Okay. It is not exponential. It is a polynomial time algorithm. Okay. Is that fine?
Sorry, I didn't understand that. Can you repeat?
Yeah. Please tell me where you didn't understand.
I got the after the decision making, like is Q the
Yeah.
pth Fibonacci?
Yeah. So is Q the pth Fibonacci number, right? Right. So that is what we are asking. How much space does this encoding require in a Turing machine? Our
Okay.
question is Q equal to f of P? This is our question. Now what do we need to store in the Turing machine? Both Q and P. If you take your Turing machine, here Q will be stored, then there is some delimiter, then here P will be stored, right? And we are asking if this is the pth Fibonacci number, right?
Yes.
Now, how many cells are used? Here we are using only log P cells, right? That is okay. But here this Q, when we are using, we will be using, if it is the right answer, we will be using around P bits here, P cells, right? P cells or P bits here, right? Because it is something like, the value is something like 1.61 to the power P, right? We will be using around P bits here. So this whole thing becomes the input size now, right? The whole thing is input size. It is P plus log P, right? It is basically, you can relate it to P, right? So the input size is P again. Okay.
Yes.
So,
Sir,
yeah.
But we don't know that if Q is FP, sir, then how can we say that we require like approximately P bits to store Q?
Exactly. So if how much time will you run it, right? If Q is not the pth Fibonacci number, they have given a very small number, right? You will, so when you are calculating F1, F2, right? F1, F2, F3, you will still go only till this number, right? You will not go more than that, right? So if you, by that time itself, you, by going in some k steps, if you get a number larger than this, right, then, and p is k is not p yet, you say that it is no, right? So you still have done only k steps, not p steps, right?
Yes, sir.
Right? So it is always relative to the input size, right? So the input size here, again, what we say as n as the input size is P here again. And hence it is a polynomial time algorithm. Okay. Is that fine?
So is it like when we're calculating the pth Fibonacci number, then it is exponential, but when we're checking if the pth Fibonacci number is equal to some other number, it's linear? Because
no, yeah, sort of, you can think about it like that, but it is not exactly correct, your explanation.
Sir, but
The thing is, when we say input size, okay, so let me sort of write it. When we say input size, it is basically input plus output size. How much size it takes to store the input as well as to store the output. Okay. That is what we call as the input size. Okay. Here the output was just 1 bit, right? Whether in linear search, whether the number is there or not, right? It is always 1 bit. It's either 0 or 1. In primality testing, there also the output is just 1 bit, 0 or 1. That's why we ignored the output sizes here, right? Because the input size dominated. But in Fibonacci number, it is not the input size that dominates, it's the output size that dominates. Okay. So though the input size is log p, the output size will have p bits. Okay. That is what we call as the input size. Okay. It is that what we use to measure the runtime of the algorithm. How much space, right, the algorithm takes to store its input as well as output, right? So that we call as the input size. Based on that size, right, we measure the time.
So, but basically, nth Fibonacci number, like when we were calculating the nth Fibonacci number and when we are checking the nth Fibonacci number, both have the same time complexity, right? But
yes,
difference, one is polynomial because we are giving means we are giving the input as n, and other is exponential because the input size is log n in that case.
No, it is not exponential in that then also. That is what I want you guys to understand. See, when we say input size, see, when we say something is polynomial, what is it polynomial with respect to? It is polynomial with respect to the input size, right? N is the input size. When we say input size, it is not just the input you are giving, right? When you say size, what is the size? It is the amount of memory, right? It is using for the input, right? So input size is a very, it should be looked in a very much more generic term, right? When we say input size, it is the amount of memory that is required to store the input as well as the output. Okay. How much memory is required to store the input as well as the output. Okay. So when we come to space complexity, we will also see how much temporary memory we use also in between in the algorithm. Here we are not bothered about it. We are only bothered about the size of the amount of memory required to store the input as well as the output. This is called as the input size. Is that fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So whenever we talk about input size, right, we will always talk in this manner. Okay. It is not just the input size. It is also the amount of memory required to store the input as well as the output. Okay. So, but we don't care about how much size we use within the algorithm. Within the algorithm, you might use exponential space. We don't care about it. That we will sort of try to sort of use it in say space complexity, right? When we study space complexity, we will use it, but in time complexity, we don't generally bother about it. Okay. Is that fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so this is one thing I wanted you guys to sort of be comfortable with. Okay, it is the input size. See, this is something we have been seeing since first semester, but there is a lot of difference. There is a lot of subtlety. Sort of, though all these algorithms, all these sort of algorithms required only 4 lines for you guys to code, right? So, and all of them looked very similar, right, with respect to the output. Sort of with respect to the time that it took for you to probably code and for you to run. But what in terms of how we call it, these algorithms are very different. This is linear, this is exponential, and Fibonacci is again sort of linear, right, or polynomial time algorithm. Okay. So whenever you have some doubt, these are 3 very nice problems to go back and see. Right? Most of the times I don't even sort of teach linear search, but it was easy because that was the first algorithm which you might have learned, right, with respect to numbers. So this is something which you can always keep in mind, right? So about what you mean by input size and how you sort of equate sort of the something that is stored on the computer and on the Turing machine, or how do you measure the time complexity? You measure it with respect to the input plus output size, which we call as the input size. Okay. So it's a generic name that is given to this. It is called as the input size because most of the time when we talk about time complexity, when you go to complexity theory, it is about decision problems rather than optimization problems. It is always decision problems. Based on the decision version of the problem, we classify it as P, NP, XP, and many other things. Okay. So that's why most of the when you studied Turing machines, we mainly concentrate on the decision version. Going from decision version to the optimization version almost takes only polynomial time, extra time. So wherever it is, if it is polynomial, it will remain polynomial. If it is exponential, it will be exponential. Okay. So in that sense, it's enough to talk about decision versions, right? So that's why the term input size is used. When you're talking about the optimization versions where something other than just yes or no should be given as output, then your input size is basically input plus output size. Okay. The amount of memory it requires to store the input plus output. Okay. So is that fine? Is that clear?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you guys, if you have still have some doubts, you go back, think over it, sit in your room, calm, think about it. Maybe have some breakfast. Okay. Or breakfast, lunch, dinner. Think over it. If you have any doubts, you come back to me to the next class, and we will take it over. Okay. So this is one thing I wanted to sort of see, and probably we also see what we mean by big O of n also. Though I have not defined it explicitly, it is basically sort of writing in constants and see how the function grows. What is the main contributor for the sort of for this function to grow, right? So that is the thing what we will see when we go to the later things. I will make it much more sort of explicit, the expression and things like that, right? So as of now, this is enough, and we will do something, and then we will sort of see. Okay. So is that fine?
Yes, sir.
So any questions? I think 10:30 is your next class, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Anyway, we will stop here so that you can take a breather, and you can have some drinks and go to the next class. Okay. So we will stop here for this class, and then we will again sort of continue in the next class. Tomorrow again, what is the time? I might have given 9 or 9:30. 9:30 is it?
9:45.
9. I think maybe 9:30, right? Because there are no.
9:30.
Yeah, there
So
are no classes.
9:45, sir. So you said half an hour before, now? So
Yeah,
9:40.
because 9:30.
Or his
Right.
schedule.
That is what I have scheduled, I think, because tomorrow there are 2 classes are not there, right? So
So you have
so that
scheduled from 9:30 to 11.
yeah, around that. So see, one more thing I want to ask, a quick question. So was the time duration of today's class okay, or is it too long?
It's okay,
No, sir. It's proper, sir.
Okay.
It's okay, sir.
So, and is the see, the thing is, one is I also want a constant feedback as to the time duration of the class, because I love doing this, and I love talking. I love doing this. I might not sometimes sort of see the time I am taking, right? You guys are concentrating on it. You should let me know if it is too much. Okay. So it will now not be too less, but it will always be more only, right? You should let me know. Okay. That is one thing. Another thing is, if I am going fast, please let me know. Okay. So I am not talking this only to one person in the class, anyone, right? If you feel that I am going fast, please stop me. Okay. So I am not teaching for the smartest or the fastest guy in the class. I am teaching for everyone, right? If I am going fast, please let me know. We will tone down. If I am going slow, I don't mind actually. Okay. If I am going slow, you sort of sit there and think about it, because there are so many things you can think about what we are discussing, right? You utilize that time to think over it. Okay. So if I am going anywhere faster, you please stop me and let me know. Okay. Then I will sort of recalibrate my speed, and we can do that. Okay. Is that fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay.
Yes,
so this will be the mode we will be following. This will be the board. Okay. So yeah, and hopefully the video and my font size and everything is okay. Is that, or was it too small?
No, sir.
It's fine, sir.
Fine.
It's perfect, sir.
Okay. Okay, guys. Okay. So you keep giving me. If you can't see anything I write, please tell me. Don't wait till the end of the class. You tell me then itself. Okay. Okay. So, okay, guys. So that's it for today. So let's meet again tomorrow. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank
Bye.
you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, guys. Bye. 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 Bye.